Welcome to CISO's Insiders Podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
Welcome, everybody. Today I'm speaking with Darrel Bateman. Thank you so much for joining me, Darrell. It's great to have you on board. So let me just do a quick, introduction, and then you can jump right in and properly introduce yourself. So I see that you've spent quite some time in Texas Tech University, holding a variety of positions. I believe the last one was Assistant VP and Information Security Officer, and that was before you moved to your current role at a company called City Bank, not to be confused with Citibank, that's spelled with an I. This one is spelled with a Y. And right now, if I'm reading my research notes correctly, you're the Chief Information Security Officer at Citibank. I welcome you to, introduce yourself and maybe tell a bit about yourself and the company.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like you said, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at City Bank. City Bank is I guess we'd call it a regional bank. We're about $3 billion in asset size, so that puts us in the range of medium sized to approaching toward large size banks, based mostly out of Texas, a little bit in New Mexico. But yeah, it's a great organization, and we actually know how to spell the word city.
Yeah, I always wondered if that was the original intent of the founders, although I'm pretty sure they knew how to spell. But I was referring to the other city, obviously. Okay, so and you've been in this position for the past 6 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So yeah, and as an icebreaker, I always like to ask a couple of personal questions. Feel free to answer whatever makes you comfortable. If you can share a bit about your marital status and maybe about your favorite drink.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm married. Let's see, about 18 years now. I waited quite a while before I got married, and but the wait was worth it. Have 3 kids. One of them just went off to college, so my wife and I are kind of experiencing that empty nest syndrome a little bit, although she's not very far away. But my favorite drink would probably be a nice glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. Big wine guy, almost probably put me in the category of wine snob, actually.
Oh, okay. So what do you feel about the wines that they produce here in California? I mean, being from Texas, is there like some kind of a hidden competition or anything like that?
Well, if there's competition, we're way behind in Texas. Definitely think Texas is coming along in that regard, but California is got about a 50-year head start on us, and don't know that we'll ever catch up. But we're still making some really good wines, and so I like California wines really well, but I support what we're doing here in Texas as well.
Yeah, the wines in California are great, but I have to say, I last week, no, a week and a half ago, I was in Dallas Fort Worth for just a couple days, and I was hosted by a group of business colleagues, and they were drinking very fine wines. I mean, they were like spending a lot of money on those bottles, and some of them were imported from Italy, others from California, probably some from Texas. I'm not that big of a wine connoisseur, meaning, I mean, I enjoy wine. I'm not a wine snob because I can't tell the difference between most brands. I just know if I like it or not. Basically, I'm an infant in that regard. If you talk to me about single malt whiskey, this is an area where I know a bit more about.
Okay. We're gonna have to sit down and talk about that sometime.
Yeah, maybe on my next trip to Texas, probably in a few weeks. But yeah, and I think, as I mentioned in our preliminary call, the intent of this podcast is to try and keep this light and learn more about you and your journey. It's not going to be too technical. I'm not too interested in in learning about your company. I'm more interested in learning about you and your path, from the beginning and until you became a CISO. So let's get started. I mean, if there's one thing you wish you'd known when you began your career, what would that be?
I'd have to say it's that you don't have to be the smartest person or the most charismatic person, or even the most ambitious person to succeed. I kind of looked up to a lot of people that had those qualities when I was early in my career, and thought, man, I don't know if I could ever be, that person standing up in front of the whole organization and giving a speech about where we're going and being the rah leader and all of that. But as the years progressed, I realized that those people were never really that much smarter than me. They just had some motivation. Certainly, there were people smarter than me, and there still are lots of people smarter than me. But you don't have to be this brilliant person, but you do need to pay attention to details, and you do need to recognize when, hey, I don't know if I have all the answers. I need to get some experts involved in this, and so that takes a little bit of setting your pride aside. Especially in this field, when you're the CISO in an organization, if anything ever comes up in an executive meeting about security, they're going to turn their heads to you and say, well, what's the answer, Darrell? And most of the time you're probably going to know, but you don't want to assume that, hey, I've got all the answers, because it's a complicated field. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of changes going on all the time. So yeah, I think early on, I was a little bit intimidated by the prospect of becoming this leader and this person that other people look up to, but suddenly I'm there now, and so yeah, just realizing, use the resources that you have available. Don't assume that you have all the answers. If you don't have all the answers, go get them, and get in touch with the right people to help you get there. And so yeah, that'd be something I wish I'd have known early on, but I got there eventually.
Yeah, I think it comes with maturity and with experience. And I totally agree with you. Personally, I think that perseverance and the constant trials and errors are what helps you, become a better leader in a sense. And with that comes confidence as well. And yeah. What would you, peg as your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Well, without being too specific, I think the thing the mistake I made, and this was fairly early on when I was in information security, was underestimating the importance of compliance versus security. When you're a security professional, when you understand how complicated some of the attacks are today, and how complicated our IT systems are and our networks, you sometimes can sort of laugh about some of the compliance items that you see, because they're sometimes written by people that don't really understand what's really going on. And so you just kind of think, okay, I'll get to compliance, but my job is to secure this organization. So that's going to be my top priority. And um, so it took a couple of events, dealing with some regulators and to realize and understand that, hey, compliance actually is very important, and you actually won't really get much credit in an organization that's highly regulated if you're not compliant. Doesn't matter how secure you are. If you have one tick mark against you on the compliance side, then it's pretty much you've failed. So yeah, it's important, especially if you're in an industry where there's a lot of regulation. Banking is one, healthcare. Several other industries have a pretty regulated. They're in a very regulated environment. So compliance is very important, and you can't ignore it, even though sometimes you might want to go, following that compliance rule is not going to help security, but nonetheless, you still have to pay attention to that. So
yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I actually put together a piece about a year ago called Compliance is BS, where I basically, I shared my experience with, talking to founders and high-level individuals across all kinds of industries, mostly in the startup industry, the startup space, basically telling me that compliance is BS, and giving, as a compliance professional, giving my rebuttal to that. And I do, agree with you on that, you don't have to like compliance, but it is a business enabler. It is a driver, and without, the intent of compliance is to put you in a good place. But I think, maybe the execution in some cases just doesn't do justice. But yeah, I tend to agree with you on that, and especially now, with all the privacy regulations and legislations that come into play, because compliance actually all of a sudden is becoming much more accessible and mandatory to even smaller organizations. So
well, and also you're seeing a lot of activity at the federal level today. I mean, just even currently,
with
with things like
CMMC,
ransomware and other attacks that have gotten the attention of our federal government, realizing, hey, this is a big problem, and so it's good that they're paying attention to it and that they're taking some action. But that's going to up the game in terms of compliance, and that's not a bad thing. So if anything, throughout that process and throughout that experience, I learned that compliance actually is a very, very necessary and good thing, especially in my environment. Our compliance rules are pretty specific, and if you follow them all, you're actually you're ahead of the game. So I've really not only come to realize that compliance is important. I've pretty much embraced it too. It's a very essential part of what I do.
yeah. Same here, and I can probably talk with you compliance all day, although it's not that interesting. So, but we'll have to cut this short. So let's, I'll move on to my next question. Talking about, your perceived failure, what would you say your biggest accomplishment was?
For me, it's just becoming the CISO. I mean, I've kind of alluded to this earlier, that I never saw myself in this position early in my career. But things happened. I kept progressing, and lo and behold, I'm responsible for some pretty large organizations and their security posture. So this role is not easy. There's a lot of expectations placed on you, a lot of responsibility, lots of accountability. So you're really in charge of making sure that your organization is as well protected as it can be, and on top of that, there's no 100% way of being 100% secure. It's like, there's no such thing as 100% risk mitigation. You're always going to have some risk, and so that's the same with information security. But you certainly you don't want to be in that bottom tier where your doors are wide open, or you're not protected from some of the easiest exploits out there. So yeah, just getting to this role was my biggest accomplishment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fair enough. And, apart from those couple of pieces of advice that you already given out, like, you don't have to be the smartest person, understanding the importance of compliance. What other advice would you give to someone that wants to pursue a career similar to yours? Hopefully someday becoming a CISO.
Yeah, I've always told my kids, no matter what field you're going to go into, if you will show up on time, work hard, do what you're told, you're going to advance. It just seems like in today's society, for whatever reason, we have a lot of people that just don't have those sort of values, and so I mean, just those simple things will help you move along. Obviously, in a technical field like this, you do need to have some ability to process a lot of technical information, understanding what IT architectures, how they're put together, how these modern IT systems work and how they interact with each other. You need to be able to understand that, and that's almost akin to understanding how the human body works. I heard someone say once that if you're an IT professional, by the time you're at 20 years in, you know more information about IT and about information systems than a doctor knows about the human body, because there's just a lot of things to know about it. So, and that some of that, you can study in school and you can, take the certification exams, but until you've actually done it and lived it, it just takes a while to get there. So yeah, keep learning, get the certifications and all of that, but continue to practice and stay current. These things are changing almost daily. The threat landscape changes quite a bit. So I spend a good portion of every day just watching the news, watching my threat intelligence feeds, and making sure I'm up to date with what my adversaries are doing out there. So yeah, just staying persistent, and you do need to have a desire to solve problems. I think most IT people are like that. They want things to run better, and they want to solve a business problem. And so in security, you're solving a security problem. So yeah, all of those things put together. It's a great field to be in right now. I don't see it diminishing much in the near future. So yeah, if you're looking at this career path, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, I agree. This space isn't going anywhere, and it's not diminishing. It's just getting bigger and bigger. It's and it's an ecosystem, right? You have so many like new startups, so many IPOs right now. It, it it brings the market upward, and those companies need cybersecurity, whatever, cloud-based or on-prem. But yeah. Um, so a quick question about the role of the CISO in an organization. In your opinion, and this is a very specific question, in your opinion, what are your thoughts about having the CISO being a part of the IT organization?
Well, this is a topic that's been debated for years. When I was at the university at Texas Tech, I reported to the CIO, but my CIO there was highly engaged in security. It was one of his top concerns. was making sure that we had a secure network and that data was protected, and all the things he genuinely cared. He was almost like a CISO himself. But you don't always have that. Some organizations, there's a lot of pressure on the CIO or the CTO to keep things operational and running and available 24/7 and meeting the needs of the end users. So security can kind of take a back seat in some of those situations. And that's why most people argue, well, the CISO should not report to the CIO, because at some point the CIO is going to say, well, I'm going to decide between security and user functionality or making the business happy. And so they feel like there's kind of a conflict of interest there. For me, I don't think you can really separate IT and information security. You can try, but at the end of the day, those IT folks, your network engineers, the people configuring servers, the people that are setting policies or enforcing policies through technical controls, they're turning the knobs and flipping the switches. So they've got direct hands-on influence in how you implement security. So it's hard for a CISO sitting outside the organization to impose his or her will on the IT organization. So what the approach I've taken, in my organization, I don't report to the CTO. We sort of sit separately. However, we are very much on board with each other. We work collaboratively together, and we both are very concerned about security. So it's a good partnership. It works really well for our organization. He and several of his staff are part of my security committee. We examine threats and we look at policies. We look at the controls that we have. We rate the strength of those controls. We monitor our system logs together. Now, ultimately, I have responsibility for the effectiveness of the overall program. But if I try to just dictate to IT, this is what y'all are going to do, this is how you're going to configure or harden servers, or how you're going to deploy endpoints across the network, or that just wouldn't work very well. So you really need a collaborative kind of partnership approach, and that's worked very well. Not saying that that's what you have to do in every organization. If being the dictator works, I don't see how it could ultimately, but I prefer to have them on board with me. So I want their buy-in, I want their input, because sometimes they know more about how the network's configured, or they know more about how Windows systems operate. They sometimes might know more about Active Directory and all of these things. So they definitely need to be part of that process, even though I will have the ultimate decision to make in most cases. I think they feel like they're a big part of that, and that's the way I want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's very aligned with most answers that I'm getting for this question. Maybe apart from a few individual occasions. And moving on to my next question, I know you've mentioned a bit about your daily routine, as part of it being getting your feeds, watching the news, understanding what's going on in the world right now. Are there any other resources that you might refer to as best that are actually helping you along the way, and how do these fit into your daily routine?
Well, you mentioned the ones I think are the most important, the information sharing organizations. There's there's a number of ISAC organizations out there that are sector specific. So if you're not a part of one, you should find one that closely aligns with your particular sector. Get involved in that. There are great organizations. They help bring people together, and so you can bounce ideas off of each other. You can establish some networking contacts, but then they also do a good job of feeding you the latest threat intel, specific indicators of compromise. Some of that's very technical in nature, but some of it's just news stories about, hey, so and so just got breached, or a new 0-day was discovered. Things like that are very important to keep up with. I think also being a part of some other professional organizations is good. I'm involved in ISC Squared. I actually help write the questions for the CISSP exam, so I'm involved in that. There's other professional organizations that you can be involved in. There's, in the state of Texas, there's a group of bank CISOs that get together 2 or 3 times a year. We talk about what we're seeing, in our individual banks, and how we're interacting with our regulators, and some of the issues that we're facing, and those are great groups to be involved in. Kind of gives you a sense of what other people are facing on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, all those are great tools. I'm not sure that that's exactly what you're asking for.
No, that's great. It's an open-ended question, and these
Yeah.
are great resources that you mentioned. Professional organizations, and I think you mentioned ISC Squared, but there are others, obviously, like ISACA. I mean, there are just so many right now, right? So, and IAP, if you want to learn more about privacy, and yeah, so many. Okay, and definitely the power of network. You mentioned the group of CISOs that are, specifically in your case, these are like Texas-based, but yeah, always powerful to be a part of a network. Is there one common myth about this profession or our space that you wanted to debunk?
Yes. That is that everything doesn't fall on your CISO or your InfoSec organization to keep the company secure. It's got to involve not only information security, but it's got to involve IT. It's got to involve the executive leadership and your ordinary, just all of your employees. Your employees a lot of times, unfortunately, are the last line of defense against some of these threats. If they can make a mistake by clicking the wrong email, or sending a sensitive file outside the network, taking a laptop home, or taking a printed report home. There's a lot of different ways that employees can either purposely or accidentally cause a data breach. So they have to be educated, and they have to be kind of aware that, hey, you've got skin in this game as well. So I think in a lot of organizations, it's kind of, information security has that's an IT thing, that somebody else's responsibility. Now everybody in the organization's got some level of responsibility to keep the data secure, and keep the organization secure.
Yeah, and if I'm not sure if you're familiar with there are a lot of security frameworks out there. So one of them is like the ISO 27001. This one actually talks about security. You need to have leadership, sponsorship, and support. And the intent there is obviously to have, the entire, organization involved at some capacity, just to make sure that that you're actually maintaining a security program. It's called ISMS, specifically with the ISO, but yeah, the intent is very clear about that. in your opinion, and again, we can keep this very general, what are the main concerns that CISOs nowadays have?
So ransomware is definitely top of mind in everyone that I talk to, and um, you know, and that's kind of brought a lot of people together in helping them identify some of the things that we've always kind of preached and tried to accomplish in information security is, protecting against malware, because ransomware is ultimately just malware. Um, but because of ransomware has gotten so prevalent, it's really, in a way, it's helping organizations be a little bit more focused on how they protect themselves and aware that they do need to protect themselves. And so, our answer to ransomware is very similar to what we've always been um, trying to accomplish, which is, address your vulnerabilities, keep your systems patched and up to date, use multi-factor. Um, Anytime you're coming in from outside your network, um, these basic hygiene protections, use antivirus, and now you want to add an EDR solution on top of that. Collect your logs and analyze them for anomalous behavior. All those things are things we've always been trying to accomplish in our industry. And of course, now you've got to have good backups. So yeah, addressing ransomware is kind of top of mind, but it also is, by doing that, you're kind of enhancing your overall program anyway. So I guess some of the other things are, kind of the shift to cloud. A lot of organizations are moving their infrastructures up into the cloud. So that places a lot more reliance on third parties. You need to know, are your third parties up to the task? Are they going to protect your data as well as you would? So there's a lot to consider there. There's a lot of advances in cloud technology. Advances in the virtualization of the whole infrastructure that have implications on security. You've got not only you've got virtual machines, but now you've got containers with virtual machines and these cloud infrastructures that are a lot more complex than they used to be. So securing that environment is not as straightforward as it used to be. Where do you put your firewall now, or where do you put your firewalls? Do you want to add a CASB to the mix? I mean, there's just a lot to think about. And then I guess the final one is, kind of the change in remote workforce, people working from home. There's kind of an expectation now that, hey, I need to support my workforce working not only from their house or on the road. Those present some challenges as well. So those are the main areas I'd be focused in on if I was a CISO, and I am.
Yeah. Okay. And so you would say those are the areas in your opinion that CISOs nowadays tend to focus on, right? Ransomware, addressing ransomware, shift to cloud. Those are the main things that you feel most CISOs should be most focused on right now, right?
Yeah, not to say that there aren't other things out there. It just depends on your sector.
Yeah.
But that's what I hear from most of my peers.
Okay, fair enough. What in your opinion, what are the most important skills that CISOs nowadays should have?
Well, I kind of mentioned this, the knowledge of how modern IT systems work. It's hard it's not impossible, but you can come up and eventually become a CISO by coming up through maybe the audit career track. But I think you're better off coming up through IT, because your auditors are typically not going to have, and I'm not trying to disparage auditors at all, but having worked directly in IT and understanding how they're architected and how they interface with each other, how APIs work, how cryptography actually works. Those are things that are taught in the IT profession. And so understanding how that works is really key to being able to secure it. If you don't really understand the data flow, who all's involved in it, where it's going, when is it crossing your boundary, and when is it going into someone else's domain, and what are they doing to protect that? Those are things you better have a good hold on. Otherwise, you can't really protect it very well.
Okay.
I think just taking a risk-based approach. I mentioned before, you're never going to be 100% secure, but you can get close, and you can do all the things that are expected. We might call them best practices. There's certainly some regulatory guidance that can be very specific, so you definitely want to meet all of that. But at the end of the day, you have to make decisions based on risk. What is the risk to the organization if we take on this project? For instance, if we start allowing all of our employees to work from home if they want to, well, what are the risks of that? You have to approach that whole question, even though it's something that the business wants or needs. You have to understand what are the risks that we're taking on by having a policy like that. And once you identify risks, you've got to take reasonable steps to mitigate that risk. So that's a very important skill. Sometimes if you see all of the threats that are out there, you can kind of be seen as someone running around saying the sky is falling, and nobody in the executive area wants to hear something like that. So you've got to identify where to focus your priorities and make good decisions in that regard.
Yeah. And my next question is about the role of the CISO and where is it going? And just to provide a bit of context here, so if you look at CISOs nowadays, the skill set that you find common are very different than the skills that you used to find common like 10 or 15 years into the past. And as a veteran in this industry, you probably noticed the change as well. In your opinion, where is the CISO role going?
Well, hopefully it's going further or higher up in the executive boardroom. But I think we're not there yet. I think that it's still largely seen, the CISO is largely seen as kind of an IT type role. So to the extent that an executive board of any organization, recognizes that IT plays a big part in us meeting our business objectives, they need to see that, well, information security is now just important. If you look at the risk involved in a data breach, just the pure cost of it. If a data breach were to hit an organization, you need to know what is the impact and how bad will that affect our bottom line. Not only through the event, but it could be reputational damage. So a lot of things to think about on information security. So I think as information security and the importance of being protected against data breaches becomes more paramount to organizations, I think you'll see the CISO get a more prominent seat at that executive board level. I have heard even from some organizations that some talk about there being a regulatory requirement that somebody on a board of directors be at least aware of cybersecurity and can, espouse and lead in that area. So remains to be seen. I think with the federal government getting more and more involved, that's going to turn into more compliance, which will then turn into more emphasis being placed on information security. So Yeah, that's kind of where I see it.
Yeah. And, I would argue that even nowadays, in some of the organizations, you already see the shift of, a CISO being a more business-oriented position than more technical position. And I think you could see that shift for the past 10 years already, or 5 to 10 years, I would say, in most organizations. Okay, great. So this is another one of those open-ended questions here. In your opinion, what would we see in the cybersecurity space next? Like, what are the main changes, innovation, in your opinion?
Well, the adversaries is definitely getting more sophisticated. I'll say a portion of them. It's kind of a strange ecosystem right now. There are not as many true what we might call hackers as there used to be, and I'm talking about the ones that really understand how to find exploits and utilize those in an attack. What you're seeing most of the time today is a commoditization of those exploits. So you don't really have to be a quote hacker in order to attack someone with ransomware or spam or what have you. Everything's become so commoditized. You can, these are almost SaaS-based services that you can just pay a fee and and get the money in return. It's almost that simple. So as the complexity of those attacks keep advancing, you're going to see that complexity move over into the commoditization of it as well. So just means we have to keep up. The controls have to stay up with the sophistication of the attacks. I've heard some talk about KillWare being something that will become more prevalent, where you perpetrate a cyber attack in order to actually kill someone. Like if they were in a hospital or giving them the wrong drugs or some attack like that. Can't see that ever getting to the stage or to the point where ransomware is right now, but certainly that is a concern, especially if you're in the medical industry. I think there are a lot of.
I would argue not only the medical industry. I mean, look at aviation, look at the cars.
Yeah.
But definitely, the health space is definitely, it's maybe I don't know if it's the easiest sector or not, but it's definitely one of the targets. But yeah.
Well, when you start killing people, you're going to get a lot more attention from law enforcement, and there will be a lot more emphasis on you getting caught and brought to justice. Some of these ransomware, they're costing a lot of money, but they're really not. There's not a whole lot being done until you start messing with public infrastructure or affecting people's lives. I think that changes the game, and so therefore, I think if that does start to get prevalent, you will see a lot more emphasis on catching those people, because right now with ransomware, you have almost 0% chance of getting caught. There's various reasons for that, but as far as just looking at the future, I think there's a lot of questions around quantum computing and what is that going to mean for our cryptography. We put a lot of trust in these cryptographic routines, and if a quantum computer can break that relatively easy, we've got to come up then with quantum encryption. And so there's a lot that remains to be seen in terms of how we're going to deal with that. I think we're some years away from that, but that's certainly being looked at right now.
Yeah. shifting gears here because we're almost, at the tail end of this episode. I wanted to ask you a couple of quick questions about vendors and vendor relationships. If you, put yourself in the shoes of a vendor just for a moment, what is it that what's the promise to yourself that you would never do?
Me or
You,
yeah.
specifically you, yeah.
Well, I don't see this from many of my vendors, but I would definitely not inundate people like me with emails and phone calls. And I get at least 100 emails a day from security vendors, wanting me to look at their product or wanting me to tell them about what I'm doing, and I don't have time for that. Now, I occasionally will see something that if they're in a space where I do have a need or I've got an active project, I might reach out to them. But for the most part, I get fairly annoyed by these vendor contacts just contacting me on LinkedIn or calling me on the phone, sending emails and then replying to that email and replying to that email, replying me just like, okay, you're not getting it. I'm not interested just because I didn't answer you. So yeah, I would not engage in that sort of activity. But if you did engage with me, then I'd want to have very technical people that can answer highly technical questions about my product. I don't need the flashy salesperson that can just tell me how much I'm going to love the product. I need to know the details of how it works and assess whether that's going to be the best fit for me.
Yeah, and I believe you answered my next question, which was, what is it that you are looking for in a vendor? So you're looking to, if I paraphrase, you're looking for professionals to speak with, looking for real answers, and for a real discussion about the issues that you might be dealing with. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any individuals in the industry or out of the industry that you consider as influential to you? It could be CISOs that you look up to. It could be, anyone at all.
Yeah, I'm not going to name any names. I think everybody at some point in their career has had somebody who gave them a chance, gave them a promotion, gave them assigned them a task, assigned them a project that was going to be very challenging, and they showed faith in that. And so I've had that a number of times in my career, and I'm very appreciative of those people who were, let's say they took a chance, but they definitely put me out there with the opportunity to fail or succeed. And for the most part, it's been on the succeed side of that. But yeah, I think everybody has some of those people in their life, and so I try to do that. I try to do that to the people who report to me, show them the kind of confidence that others showed in me.
Okay. And knowing as a vendor, knowing that you don't like to be bombarded, is there any way vendors and listeners can connect to you in a non-intrusive manner?
If you get me at a conference, especially if it's a in person, it hasn't worked as well on these virtual conferences. But yeah, I've got time to discuss and talk about things, and that's one of the reasons I would go to an RSA or some other professional conference, Black Hat, something like that. I've set aside the time to go and learn and to see what other vendors are doing. So that's probably the best time to engage with me. Day to day is not going to work too well because I'm just too focused on on my own projects. Yeah, I'm looking forward to when we can do a lot more in-person events.
Yeah. Well, I believe they already started, with, like trickles, but I'm not sure. I think Texas is probably back to normal right now, right?
Not totally.
Not totally? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, look, as I mentioned, I spent a couple of days there a few weeks ago. It's to me, it seemed like very bizarre. I mean, everything was
It
like
probably does,
very
compared to other areas.
different. Yeah, very different than California. But anyway, okay. For final bonus question, if money was never an issue, what would you do with your life?
Well, I'd take care of myself and my family. But then, I think I'd find some charitable organizations or create one or two that can make some sort of difference. We live in a very political world today. Lots of political opinions flying around out there, and a lot of strife and disagreement. And I think that's sad, because there's a lot of good ideas on both sides of every issue, and it hurts us as a group, as a country, if we just hate each other, if we just disagree on something. And so I'd look for ways to try to influence that and try to get us back a little bit more to some some commonality, some ways to work together. Don't always have to agree, but you don't have to hate each other if you disagree.
Yeah. But and this is my final follow-up question. Do you actually think that politics are different right now, or is it just that the presence of social media that's actually, provides you with a like foundation to spew whatever it is that you want to spew?
I do think it's different. I think that, and social media has played a part in that, but only because it's been a vehicle to get more people engaged, in political discussions. But the problem is there's so much, I don't know, for lack of better term, ignorance. It's hard to know what's true and what is political rhetoric, and people get very tribal with it for whatever reason. They think, oh, okay, well, this is where I stand, and if you're not right here with me, then you're the enemy. And we shouldn't be that way. We should all be trying to do what's best for the country and for our world. I think we could get there with a little higher quality leadership on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And with these final notes, we can wrap up the episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, Darrell. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.